I never told anyone what I found inside my grandfather's sealed file the morning after my family mocked the gift I spent 9 months building. Not until the meeting in my father's conference room 3 days later, when everything finally collapsed. My name is Claire Harmon. I am 34 years old, and I work as a records clerk at Harmon and Pierce, the law firm my father founded with his best friend right after law school. I have been there for 11 years. I know every archive box, every probate filing, every old land transfer and trust amendment in that building. When the partners need something impossible found in less than an hour, they call me. But in my father's mouth, I become basically our file clerk. Just a clerk. Just staff. Not daughter. Not family. Not someone who matters. The birthday was my 34th. The gift was a cedar house I built by hand. 9 months of Sunday afternoons, of evenings after work, of sanding and measuring and hoping. They called it trash. They flicked the key across the counter like crumbs. Before I tell you what happened in that conference room, leave a comment that says seen, if you believe the people who make you small are depending on you not to notice your own size. There is a particular kind of silence in a kitchen when 20 people watch your mother call your gift trash. It is not empty. It is full. Full of performance, of complicity, of the comfortable certainty that some people exist to be laughed at. I have spent 34 years learning to hear the difference between a room that is simply quiet and one that is waiting for you to disappear. The sounds are not the same. My father, Richard Harmon, founded the firm with Martin Pierce. My mother, Eleanor, chairs every fundraiser, every board, every charity gala where women wear pearls and talk about service while someone else clears the plates. My younger brother, Andrew, became a lawyer. Of course he did. He made partner at 36. There is a picture of my father hanging the partner plaque in Andrew's office. My mother had it framed. I tried law school for 1 semester. For months. I woke up unable to breathe. I told my father I could not do it. He looked across his desk and said, "Then at least do not embarrass the family." I came home. I took the only place he offered. Records. Archives. Back rooms. 11 years in the basement where fluorescent lights buzz and old files smell like dust and mildew from before I was born. My office badge says records clerk. I kept it in my wallet because some part of me thought if I carried the title long enough, maybe it would stop hurting. It never did. The thing is, I was very good at it. Better than anyone else. I knew where every old trust was filed, every deed, every corporate transfer, every sealed family settlement nobody wanted to remember. The partners would come downstairs with panic in their faces because something was missing. A boundary agreement, an original signature page, a forgotten codicil from 20 years earlier. And I would find it. Always. Then they would thank my father for hiring such loyal staff. Staff. Not daughter. One afternoon, a receptionist named Marlene stood in the copy room watching me haul archive boxes onto a cart. She said, "Everybody in this building acts like you're the help, but you're the only person who actually knows where anything is." I laughed. I told her that was just how families were. No, that was just how mine was. I bought my house last year. My parents came for exactly 22 minutes. My mother said the ceilings were low. My father asked if the neighborhood was safe. Then they left before I could show them the backyard. The birthday party was the first time they had been back. I spent weeks planning. I ironed tablecloths. I polished windows. I cooked everything myself. The cedar house had taken 9 months. Every Sunday afternoon, every evening after work, I built it in my garage from scraps of cedar, and the original plans to my grandfather's house that I found in an archive box nobody had opened in years. I told myself it was sentimental. That my parents would finally see I knew something they did not. That I had made something beautiful. The embarrassing truth is I wanted them to love me in front of other people. I wanted one room, one night, one moment where my father looked at me with pride instead of tolerance. The housewarming was in my new place. Open kitchen, living room behind it, lights too bright because my mother said dim lighting made a house look cheap. 20 people. My father's law partners, their wives, 2 neighbors from the old street. The kind of people who hold a wine glass by the stem and look around your house like they are checking whether it deserves itself. My cedar house sat in the middle of the island. 18 inches long. Tiny black shutters. Little porch. The front door even opened if you turned the brass key. Inside, under the floor panel, was the real gift. But they never looked long enough to find it. My mother leaned forward. Tapped one fingernail against the roof. "Well," she said, "this is homemade." Then one of her friends smiled into her Chardonnay and said, "I suppose that's sweet." My father picked up the key, turned it over once, tossed it back down. "Honestly, Claire, where would we even put this?" Claire. Not honey. Not sweetheart. Not kiddo. Claire. The way he used to say my name when I was in trouble as a child. When he wanted everybody in the room to remember exactly where I belonged. I was still standing there holding the empty gift bag. I had sawdust under one thumbnail, because I had been sanding the base that morning. If you have ever stood in a room and realized the people embarrassing you are enjoying the audience almost as much as the humiliation, you probably know this feeling. I bent down, picked up those keys, said, "You're right." My mother looked relieved, like she thought I had finally learned the script. One of the women near the sink asked what I did again. Before I could answer, my father smiled. "Claire works in records down at the firm. She's basically our file clerk." The room softened around him. People smiled. Nodded. One of the men said, "Nothing wrong with that." The way people do when there is obviously something wrong with that. Then my mother looked at the little cedar house again. Wrinkled her nose. "Honestly, darling, this gift is trash. You should have just brought wine." Everybody laughed. Not hard. Just enough. I looked down at the tiny brass key in my palm, then at the little house, then at my parents. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to make them proud long enough to notice something strange. Neither of them had recognized the front porch, even though I had built it from the original plans to my grandfather's house. The thing they did not know was that when I found those plans in the archive basement, I found something else. A sealed file marked with my grandfather's handwriting. For Claire only. I had not opened it then. I had slid it back into the box and told myself it was none of my business. That was what I always did when something threatened the version of my family I had spent years surviving. I put it away. I made dinner. I kept the peace. Then my mother called my gift trash in front of 20 people. And suddenly all I could think about was that file. After everyone left, I stood alone in my kitchen. Wine glasses still out. Lipstick on one of them. Crumbs on the counter. The little cedar house still sitting there, turned slightly away like even it had been dismissed. I picked it up. Turned the key. Opened the tiny front door. Underneath the floor panel, exactly where I had hidden it, was the file number. The one that matched the sealed box in the basement archive at Harmon and Pierce. I drove to the office before sunrise. The parking garage was half empty. My heels sounded too loud in the stairwell. For a second, I had the ridiculous thought that maybe I should turn around. Go home. Pretend none of it had happened. That was always my instinct. Make it smaller. Make it survivable. The archive room was in the basement. Behind records and litigation storage. No windows. Gray carpet. The same humming fluorescent lights that made everybody look slightly sick. I still had my key card. Of course I did. I was the one who programmed half the access levels. The sealed box was exactly where I had left it. Third shelf. Back wall. Property transfers and estate planning. Harmon family private. My grandfather's handwriting again. The file number from inside the little cedar house matched perfectly. I sat down at the metal table. Opened the box. Inside was a manila folder. One brass key. And a letter. "Claire," it began. "If you are reading this, then your parents finally made the mistake of showing you exactly who they are in front of witnesses." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I kept reading. "Your father believes that because he built the firm, he owns the family. Your mother believes that because she protects appearances, she protects the truth. Neither one understands that truth survives without them." Inside the file was the original transfer for the Harmon lot on Willow Street. Not the house. The land beneath it. The land under my parents' house. The office building. Half the parking structure. Everything my father had spent 20 years leveraging to make himself important. The property had never been transferred to him. Not legally. My grandfather had put it in trust. For me. Not for me exactly. For whichever child in the family understood how to keep records. How to notice. How to stay when everyone else only wanted to be seen. There was an amendment attached. Signed. Notarized. The beneficiary named in the final version was me, Claire Harmon. There was one condition. If any family member publicly humiliated, diminished, or denied the beneficiary in connection with the family business or inheritance, all rights reverted immediately. I thought about the keys hitting the counter. The laughter. My mother saying, "This gift is trash." My father calling me a clerk in front of the partners. And suddenly I understood why my grandfather had built the little house plans into the file. He had known. Maybe not the exact room. Maybe not the exact words. But he knew what kind of people my parents were when they had an audience. I took the file upstairs to Martin Pierce's office. Senior partner. My father's best friend. The other name on the door. His assistant looked startled when she saw me. I was usually only allowed upstairs if somebody needed boxes moved or signatures found. "I need to see Mr. Pierce," I said. She started to tell me he was in a meeting. Then she saw the folder in my hand. And my face. She stood up immediately. Opened the door. Martin was at the conference table with 3 other partners. Coffee cups. Laptops. One of them still laughing at something. I set the folder down in front of him. He looked annoyed at first. Then he saw the file number. Then the key. Then my grandfather's signature. His whole face changed. He opened the folder. Read the first page. Then the second. Then he stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "My father threw it away," I said. Nobody spoke. Martin looked down at the papers again. Then he said something I had never heard him say in my entire life. "Miss Harmon." Not Claire. Not kiddo. Not sweetheart. Miss Harmon. Martin picked up the office phone. Called my father. I could hear only Martin's side. "Richard." Pause. "No, listen to me." Longer pause. Then Martin looked at me. Actually looked at me. And his voice changed. "Richard, you need to come in immediately." Another pause. "No, this isn't about the housewarming." He looked down at the key in his hand. Then back at the papers. Then at me. "It's about Claire." For the first time in my life, the room did not get smaller when someone said my name. It got very, very quiet. An hour later, my parents walked into that conference room still laughing about my trash gift. They came in together. That almost made me laugh. They always arrived together when there was something they wanted fixed. My mother had on the same cream jacket. My father still smelled faintly of cologne and expensive scotch. He walked in smiling. Then he saw me. Then he saw Martin standing beside the conference table instead of sitting at it. Then he saw the folder. The smile disappeared. "What is this?" my father asked. Martin did not answer right away. The other partners were still in the room. 2 of them had been at my house the night before. One was the man who had laughed when my father called me a clerk. He would not look at me now. My mother saw the little brass key sitting on the table, and actually smiled. That is what still hurts. She thought this was about the gift. "Claire, honestly, if you were upset, you didn't have to make such a production out of that silly little house." Martin looked at her. Then at me. Then said very quietly, "Mrs. Harmon, I would advise you not to say another word until you understand what is on this table." The room changed. My father straightened. That partner voice came into him. The one he used in court. "Martin, if this is about Claire being emotional after last night." Martin cut him off. "Richard, sit down." Nobody in that room had spoken to my father that way in years. Not since my grandfather died. For one strange second he looked old. Not elderly. Just suddenly not the largest person in the room anymore. He sat. My mother sat beside him, still confused, still irritated. Martin opened the file. Slid the deed across the polished conference table. The original transfer for the Willow Street parcel. My father looked at it once. Then again. Then his face lost all its color. "No," he said. That's impossible. He picked up the paper. I watched his hands. The same hands that had flicked the key across my kitchen counter the night before. They were shaking. My mother leaned toward him. What is it? He did not answer. He kept reading. Then Martin placed my grandfather's letter on top of the deed. The room went very still. My father read the first line silently. Then his eyes moved to me. Then back to the paper. Finally, he read it out loud. If you are reading this, then Richard finally confused humiliation with authority. One of the partners inhaled sharply. My mother looked at me, then at my father, then back at me again. I do not think she had ever imagined there were parts of our family she did not control. My father kept reading. Your daughter is the only person in this family who understands how to preserve what matters. You taught her to stand in the background because you mistook usefulness for weakness. If you humiliate her publicly in connection with the family business or inheritance, all rights revert immediately. I could see the room reinterpret itself. The men who had laughed in my kitchen. The woman who had smiled into her wine glass. All of them sitting there remembering my mother calling my gift trash. Remembering my father saying, "File clerk." Remembering me standing there with the keys in my hand. One of the partners finally said, "Richard, was this at the housewarming?" Nobody answered. Nobody had to. My mother made a small sound. Then she said, "Claire, we didn't mean it." I almost believed her. That is the worst thing about me. Even then, after years of being introduced like staff, and seated at the end of tables and talked over in rooms I had cleaned and planned and held together, some part of me still wanted to make it easier for them. Then my mother said, "You know how your father gets around people." And there it was. The truth. Not an apology. An explanation. The same one she had been giving my whole life. He didn't mean it. You're too sensitive. Don't embarrass him. I looked at her. Then at the men in the room who had watched it happen. Then at the brass key sitting between us. And suddenly I was not embarrassed anymore. I was angry. Quietly. Completely. I picked up the key. Held it in my palm. "No," I said. "You knew exactly what you were doing." My father stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward. "You would destroy this family over a misunderstanding?" I looked at him. At the man who had spent my whole life acting like my worth was something he got to measure. You built this family on the assumption that I would always stay small enough to protect it. Nobody moved. Then Martin looked at my father and said, "Richard, if Claire files this, the property reverts immediately." My father stared at me. My mother put one hand over her mouth. And for the first time in my entire life, when somebody said my name in that room, it sounded like power instead of apology. "I spent 11 years in your basement," I said. "Finding things you lost. Fixing things you broke. Being invisible so you could feel important. And you repaid me by calling me trash in front of your friends." I put the key in my pocket. "I am not your clerk. I am not your embarrassment. I am not small enough to protect your ego anymore." I walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it quietly. I wanted them to hear the latch. The finality. The sound of something ending that they did not understand. I went back to my parents' house that afternoon while they were still at the office. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. My mother always said a good neighborhood was one where people did not need to lock things. What she meant was a neighborhood where everyone already knew who belonged. The house smelled like lemon polish and lilies. Everything was exactly where it had always been. The umbrella stand. The silver bowl for keys. The framed photograph of Andrew in his graduation robe on the console table by the stairs. Mine had never been there. That detail hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was new. Because suddenly I could not stop seeing all the old things clearly. The way my mother kept Andrew's wedding picture in the living room, and mine in the upstairs hallway. The way my father called Andrew my son, and me Claire. Like I was a person he had met through work. The little cedar house was on the sideboard in the dining room. My mother had put it there after the party. Not thrown away. Not displayed. Just moved slightly off to the side between a crystal bowl and a heavy silver candlestick. Like she did not know what to do with it, but could not quite bring herself to throw it out. I stood there for a minute, looking at it. The tiny shutters. The porch. The little brass keyhole. 9 months of evenings in my garage. 9 months of hoping. I picked it up carefully. Then I opened the drawer beneath the sideboard and found the key exactly where she had dropped it after everyone left. I put it in my pocket. The thing I thought I would feel was triumph. I didn't. I felt embarrassed. Not because I was taking it back. Because I had ever offered it. There was a note on the kitchen counter in my mother's handwriting. Call florist. Return silver tray. Talk to Claire. 3 errands. All in the same blue ink. I stared at that for longer than I should have. Because even then, after everything, some part of me was still looking for proof that I mattered in a different category than chores. My phone rang. Martin. Claire, he said. Before your father left the office, he asked if there was still a way to keep this quiet. I leaned against the counter. The kitchen window over the sink was open a crack. I could hear somebody mowing a lawn down the block. He said if the property reverted, people would talk. People. Not me. Not us. Not what he had done. Just people. I know, I said. Martin was quiet for a second. Then he said very gently, you don't owe them silence. I think that was the moment it finally shifted. Not when I found the file. Not when Martin said, Miss Harmon. Not even when my father read my grandfather's letter. This. Standing alone in my parents' kitchen with the little cedar house in my hands, and realizing the arrangement had only ever worked because I kept agreeing to disappear inside it. I took the possession order out of my purse, folded it once, left it on the kitchen counter under my mother's note. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just exact. Then I walked through the house one last time. The dining room. The study. The hall with all the family pictures. At the top of the stairs, there was a photograph of all of us from 15 years ago. My father in the middle. My mother beside him. Andrew close at his shoulder. And me at the end of the row holding a tray of drinks because somebody had asked me to bring them in right before the picture. I took that one off the wall. Not because I wanted it. Because I was tired of leaving proof behind. When I got back to my car, I put the cedar house on the passenger seat. The key beside it. Then I looked at my office badge lying in my purse. Records clerk. I held it in my hand for a second. Then I took a pen from the glove compartment and wrote one word across the plastic cover. Owner. When my parents got home and found the possession order on the counter, they came to my house together. I knew they would. They had spent my whole life arriving together when there was something they wanted fixed. It was raining. Not hard. Just enough that my mother's hair had gone flat around her face by the time I opened the door. My father was standing beside her in the driveway with his coat unbuttoned and his car keys clenched in one hand. The same hand that had tossed my little brass key across my kitchen island. For a second, none of us spoke. Then my mother looked past me into the house. The little cedar house was sitting on the entry table by the front door. Not hidden. Not off to the side. Right in the middle. She saw it and started crying immediately. Not the careful crying she did in public. This was messy. Lipstick smudged. Shoulders shaking. You took it back, she said. I looked at the little house. Then at her. No, I said. I stopped leaving it where it wasn't wanted. My father still had not come up the walk. He stayed at the curb for a second like he thought distance could still make him important. Then he finally came forward. He looked older than he had 2 days earlier. Not smaller. Just suddenly visible. The lines around his mouth. The gray at his temples. The terrible, stubborn pride that had cost him everything before he even realized there was a price. Martin says you can file the reversion tomorrow, he said. I can, I said. And if you do, you lose the property. He stopped. Rain sliding off the end of his nose. My father had spent his whole life believing there was always one more room where he would be the person everyone listened to. The courtroom. The office. The dinner table. And now he was standing in my driveway looking at the daughter he had introduced as basically a clerk. He said very quietly, Claire, please. That word almost undid me. Not because it was enough. Because it was the first time in my life I had ever heard him ask instead of expect. My mother stepped closer. She looked at the cedar house again. then at me. We didn't know, she said. I almost laughed. The rain. The driveway. The tiny house in my entryway. All of it suddenly felt so absurd. You knew, I said. You just thought it didn't matter because you didn't think I did. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked away. And then finally he started crying. Not gracefully. Not the way important men cry in movies with one tear and a meaningful silence. He folded one hand over his face, shoulders shaking. Standing in the rain beside the hydrangeas my mother always made me cut back every spring. I never thought you'd do this, he said. There it was. The whole thing. Not I never thought I hurt you. Not I never thought you felt that way. I never thought you'd do this. Because somewhere inside him, he had always believed I would keep carrying the weight just to keep him comfortable. I stood there with the brass key warm in my pocket. Then I took it out. The little key to the little cedar house. The thing they had laughed at. The thing they had called trash. I held it in my palm for a second. Then I looked at my father and said, You taught me to keep everything important hidden in small places. Nobody spoke. The rain kept falling. Finally my mother whispered, What happens now? I looked back through the doorway into my house. At the cedar house on the table. At the chipped blue bowl by the door. At the quiet little life inside that nobody had helped me build. Then I said, Now I stopped trying to earn my place. I closed the door gently. Later that night, I put the brass key back inside the little cedar house and set it in the center of the entry table where everyone could see it. For years, I thought I wanted my parents to feel ashamed. What I really wanted was to stop feeling ashamed of needing more than scraps. I want to tell you what this experience taught me, because I did not spend 11 years in a basement, 9 months building a house, and 34 years waiting for recognition just to have a story. I did it because worth is not determined by who sees it. It is determined by who is capable of seeing it. My parents were not capable. That was their limitation. Not mine. I learned that the people who make you small are often depending on you not to notice your own size. They need your invisibility to maintain their performance. They need your silence to protect their narrative. They need your gratitude for scraps to prove that scraps are enough. I stopped being invisible. I stopped being silent. I stopped being grateful for less than I deserved. This was not revenge. This was correction. This was the reclamation of space I had always occupied but never claimed. Martin offered me a position. Not in records. In client relations. You know where everything is, he said. You know what everyone needs. You know how to find what is lost. I accepted. Not because I needed the title. Because I needed the visibility. Because I needed to be seen in the rooms where I had always been present, but never acknowledged. I started attending partner meetings. Not as staff. As counsel. As someone who understood the firm's history better than the partners themselves. I found documents they had forgotten. I traced transactions they had lost. I became essential in a way that could not be ignored. My father retired early. Not because of the property reversion. Because of the embarrassment. Because the partners who had laughed in my kitchen now looked at him differently. Because the man who had built the firm on the assumption that his daughter would stay small had discovered that she had grown without his permission. He moved to Florida with my mother. Andrew visits them monthly. I do not. We speak occasionally. Phone calls. Holidays. Careful conversations that do not mention the past. They do not apologize. I do not expect them to. Apologies would not restore the years. Would not erase the laughter. Would not make the cedar house anything other than what it was. Evidence of my hope. Proof of their blindness. I keep it on my entry table. The brass key inside. The door open. Visible to everyone who enters. A reminder. Not of pain. Of transformation. Of the moment I stopped trying to earn my place and started owning it. I bought my grandfather's house. The one on Willow Street. The one whose plans I found in the archive box. It needed work. Restoration. Care. I spent 2 years on it. Not 9 months. 2 years. Every weekend. Every evening. Every moment I could spare from the firm, from my new position, from the life I was building. I restored the porch first. The one my parents had not recognized. The one that was the foundation of everything. Then the shutters. Then the interior. Then the garden where my mother had always made me cut back the hydrangeas. I let them grow. Wild. Uncontrolled. Beautiful. I moved in on my 36th birthday. Not a party. No guests. Just me. The cedar house on the mantel. The brass key in my pocket. The grandfather who had seen me when no one else did. Present in every beam. Every floorboard. Every window that let in light without asking permission. I am 36 now. I am a partner at Harmon and Pierce. Not because my father gave it to me. Because Martin recognized what I had always been. Because I demonstrated what I had always known. Because I stopped being invisible and became undeniable. I have a house that I restored with my own hands. I have a position that I earned through my own competence. I have a life that I built without my parents' help or approval or recognition. This is enough. This is more than enough. The cedar house sits on my mantel. The door is open. The key is inside. Visitors ask about it. I tell them it is a reminder. Of what? They ask. Of the moment I realized that the people who could not see my value were not the people who determined it. This is the truth I carry. This is the legacy I build. Not from my father. Not from my mother. From my grandfather. From Martin. From Marlene, who saw me in the copy room. From myself, who finally saw myself. My name is Claire Harmon. I am 36 years old. I am a partner at Harmon and Pierce. I am the owner of my grandfather's house on Willow Street. I am the woman who spent 11 years in a basement and emerged to claim the building above it. I am the daughter who was called a clerk and became a counselor. I am the builder of a cedar house that was called trash and became the key to everything. I am visible. I am present. I am essential. Not because my father finally sees it. Because I finally see it. Because I stopped trying to earn my place and started owning it. If this story meant something to you, leave a 2 in the comments so I know you stayed with me through the whole thing. And if you know someone who needs to hear it, share it with them. Some messages find the people who need them.